Are you tired of the same old commanders over and over? Atraxa, Corval, Yuriko? Well, guess what? I'm about to show you a commander you've never seen before. Let's go. What up, what up, what up? Welcome back to my channel. I'm Ruxora, and here we talk about all things Magic the Gathering. Today we are doing another of our Commander deck techs, where people send me some type of EDH list that they've made, and I go over the deck list, the individual card choices, the archetype choice, and at the end I'll give it a rating out of 10. Today's submission comes from, once again, friend of the channel, Professor Amateur, who has done a lot of great work and has made a ton of interesting deck lists, particularly around unique commanders that previously have had not seen a lot of use. So we're going to take a look at a very unique deck today, so very excited about that. And I've actually played against this deck, seen a lot in action, and it really works well. It's very, the strategy itself is not unique, but the contributions of the commander are pretty substantial, and it's very nice to see and refreshing to see a brand new commander being used in this unconventional way. All right, so here is our commander for our deck, and it is none other than Shessra, Death's Whisper. It is 2 green black, so 4 mana for a 1/3 legendary creature, human elf warlock. This is from the Dungeons and Dragons set. It was actually an uncommon, and unfortunately didn't see a lot of play in standard. It was maybe a bulk rare in draft, sorry, not a bulk rare, bulk thing that you would open in draft. Yeah, so really unheard of card, but it's actually fairly powerful in this scenario. So let's take a look at the effect. We have Bewitching Whispers, which says when it enters the battlefield, target creature blocks this turn if able. Not really that powerful of an effect. And in general, we're really not paying too much attention to this ability. What we really care about is Whispers of the Grave. At the beginning of your end step, if a creature died this turn, you may pay 2 life, and if you do, draw a card. So we are using this to just be a card advantage engine, have something die, pay 2 life, which isn't really that relevant, especially in Commander when we have 40 life to start, and then just draw a ton of cards and really dig through our deck. Note that this is basically exactly like Morbid. If you're aware of that mechanic, it says if a creature died. So it can be your opponent's creature, or it can be your creature, it really doesn't matter. But again, this only triggers at your end step, so unless you are killing something of your opponent's during your main phase, there's not a lot of ways for you to get its trigger other than something of yours dying, which is really what this deck's about. Speaking of, let's take a look at the actual deck list. All right, so here we have the actual deck list. Again, thanks to Professor Amateur for the submission. And, it's told me that it's fairly budget. So we have a 517 for the whole entire deck. And, so fairly cheap given what we typically look at on this channel. Again, not trying to break the bank, but at the same time, we are playing a lot of the, so-called commander staples here. So what we have here is basically a sacrifice deck. When you think about it, Shessra works really well. If you just sacrifice something, get that Morbid trigger in effect, draw lots of cards, and then use that to fuel your game plan of just getting lots of creatures, sacrificing them, and getting value on that. There is also a very specific infinite combo in this deck that typically, is pretty hard to assemble, but it is still nice to know that if the game goes long and you draw lots of cards, there's just a I win button somewhere in your deck. So let's take a look at the list here. Again, we have Shessra as the commander. That was known already. We've got Vraska Golgari Queen as our first card here. Great card for any sacrifice deck. Also great as removal. Just kind of having that effect to just destroy any non-land permanent. Like Assassin's Trophy, like Abrupt Decay. It isn't just an Abrupt Decay, isn't it? it is just an abrupt decay effect. Obviously, the Vraska itself can be countered, but the -3 essentially functioning as an abrupt decay. So very nice effect there. Liliana the Necromancer, another planeswalker here. This one kind of being more of a budget option. Not I say budget, it's $15. I guess it's here mostly to, reanimate bring creatures back to the hand. It's, the +1's not too relevant, but the -1, just for free, getting a creature back, pretty nice. The -7, the ultimate, I don't see coming up too often, but if you ever get there, it happens. But I typically see this coming into play, minusing, and getting you some value. One of my favorite cards in this deck is Lolth Spider Queen, which sees a lot of standard play. It says 3 black. Whenever a creature you control dies, you put a loyalty counter on it. And it can do a bunch of things. It can draw cards. It can make spiders, which can be great for sacrificing. And that's this -8, which is not really that relevant in Commander. It says whenever an opponent is dealt combat damage by one or more creatures, it basically makes it so that if it was less than 8 life lost, they lose 8 life. You make it so that they lose 8 life. So if you only deal 1 damage to them, then they take 8. And that can be pretty interesting if you had lots of menacing spiders on the field. Yeah, so Lolth is really great here. Just getting to, get a loyalty counter every time you sacrifice it. So sacrifice anything. Again, it doesn't have to be the spiders. It can be anything. So I've seen this card get tons of loyalty counters in games that we've played. So it can be very threatening. Moving on to the creatures, again, lots of creatures in the slot. Again, we want to be having lots of creatures, sacrificing them, and getting value off of them. We've got Birds of Paradise, Carrion Feeder. That's a fairly obvious sacrifice outlet. We've got Cauldron Familiar, which is part of the Infinite combo that we'll go over later. Caustic Caterpillar, Deathrite Shaman, Elves of Deep Shadow, and a bunch of more elves. Spore Frog, which is a free sacrifice, but also is great at preventing combat damage. Excuse me, if you have some way to, recur this back to your hand, again, as we've already seen with Liliana. And there are other ways to do it. In this deck, Spore Frog can just kind of be this, you can't touch me object that is difficult to deal with. Vasira Seer, Vasira Seer. It's one of the most hardest cards to say, in my opinion. Most difficult to say, definitely, for no reason. Young Wolf is great because it is 2 sacrifices in 1. You play it, you sacrifice it, you trigger its Undying, and it comes back. We have Ambush Viper here, which I believe, is just kind of a fun of. It's got Flash and Death Touch, so, it could just come into play and, block something and kill it. It also is kind of interesting with Shessra. Shessra, works really well with Death Touch. So if you play the Ambush Viper first, and then you play Shessra, you can just snipe something that is pretty big, and then afterwards you've triggered the Whispers of the Grave. So kind of a, not the flashiest card. Again, it's a fairly vanilla creature, but still has some value in this deck, and I think that's kind of interesting. And again, actually, when you rebuy the card, if you have again some kind of regrowth or ways to get back creatures from your yard, Ambush Viper can make it very difficult for larger opponents. Bloodghast here, fairly obvious one, just sacrificing it and then playing a land to bring it back. Again, can't block, but you don't really care about that. We've got Carrion Thrall, which is more 2 bodies in 1. There are a lot of these. You'll see that there are multiple bodies in one creature, as I said with Young Wolf. That's really valuable in a sacrifice deck. Again, we're getting those creatures back, and if you think about it, as opposed to getting 1 creature back, you're essentially getting 2 because you're getting that extra body with the sacrifice. Got Dalthy Voidwalker here, serving as a kind of hate piece, and sometimes can get you some value, again with rebuying it. Paradise for more ramp. Priest of Forgotten Gods as both. It ramps, draws you cards, and forces your opponent to sometimes sacrifice a creature. So We've got Secure Tribe Elder, can be really nice, just again as a free sacrifice. Also just good in the early turns to ramp. Zulaport Cutthroat is a staple. Notably, there is no Blood Artist in this deck. Having to target one particular opponent, with the Blood Artist effect is not as good as Zulaport Cutthroat, which just says everyone, and you don't have to worry about, if somebody has hexproof, or if, maybe you don't have enough death triggers. Zulaport Cutthroat will get the job done. Burnished Heart for ramp, Eternal Witness to get cards back, Fleshback Marauder, being, not the flashiest card, but can be good, again, when you can sacrifice it, rebuy it, and bring it back. Can sort of be a repeatable removal effect. Grim Horror Specs is a no-brainer. We're sacrificing creatures and drawing cards. Excuse me. Liliana Heretical Healer is a great one. I love this card in Commander. Being again just a good sacrifice outlet when not a sacrifice outlet, but a good sacrifice payoff where you play it alongside a sacrifice outlet. You sacrifice something immediately get rewarded with a 2/2 zombie and a nice planeswalker that has the ability to rebuy some creatures using its -X ability. Basically any deck that really likes rebuying smaller creatures and doesn't mind discarding some cards every once in a while can be really nice, because you do have to fuel the +X with the -X with the +2 effect as well. You can't just endlessly rebuy creatures, but really like seeing this card in a variety of decks. Midnight Reaper is essentially a Grim Horror Specs. Not going to go into that too much. You've got enchantment removal here. Merit of the Clan Nel Toth is kind of a no-brainer. It's like, it sucks because, I was talking earlier about, being very unique. Merit is another card that is seen quite a lot in Commander, but it is just really good and rebuys stuff, as you said. So it's just good. So put it in your deck. Obstinate Bailoff here. Just being a 4/4 that gains you life. The discard ability doesn't typically come up, but you play it, gain some life. Maybe have a barrier against damage effects. Really is not the most synergistic card, but it's there, and it's also a fairly cheap card, so that's one of the reasons for that as well. Poison Tip Archer is a really interesting one. It's got Reach and Death Touch. Death Touch being the main keynote there. And it says whenever another creature dies, each opponent loses 1 life. So this is a nice Blood Artist type effect still, triggering off of whenever any creature dies. Both yours and your opponent's. This can be a really good play into Shessra, again, if you really need to get the some cards going, and then you can rebuy it, play it again, and have it as a card advantage. Or it's not a card advantage, a nice sacrifice payoff for draining your opponents, causing your opponents to lose life. We get so confuzzled with damage, life loss, draining. Anyways, of course, Commander staple, Solemn Simulacrum, Sadbot is here. Shriekmaw is nice because you can play it for its evoke cost, have its trigger go on the stack, and then sacrifice it before you have to sacrifice it to the evoke trigger. Sidisi, kind of the same thing, just playing it, sacrificing something, and being a demonic tutor. Really nice effect there. Also having Death Touch. You see kind of the theme here of, trying to put a few things that have Death Touch just because you never know when that can come up. And again, these cards are just good. We've got Thractus here. Again, kind of a Obstinate Bailoff effect of gaining life, being that buffer. And then also if you sacrifice it, it makes a 3/3. So kind of, again, being that Carrier Thrall type effect of being 2 bodies, or Young Wolf effect of being 2 bodies in 1. That's it for the creatures. Just giving us a brief overview. Again, mostly it's very synergistical. There are some cards, that are maybe not, and they're just kind of thrown in there to either be cheap or, it's I believe Professor Amateur just called them filler cards, but also just to be, good cards. Again, Obstinate Bailoff, You could even say like Burnished Heart, maybe not the most synergistical card in the deck. Yeah, I would argue Thractus is actually still fine, even though it's maybe not the most. It's maybe not what you would think of when you think of Shessra here. Moving on to the sorceries and instants, we've got lots and lots of ramp. We've got Farseek, Nature's Lore. 3 visits? Yes, 3 visits is that as well. We've got some regrowth effects of regrowth proper. Treasure's Find, which I didn't even know this card exists. It's just a Golgari regrowth that exiles itself. We've got Balaged Recovery, and I believe that's it for the regrowths. We've got Witherbloom Command to either fill our graveyard, be some kind of removal, or drain our opponents. A really awesome card in this deck is Culling Rituals. This is destroy each non-land permanent, with mana value 2 or less, and you add black or green for each permanent destroyed this way. So you can do a lot of stuff with your cheap cards. Your very cheap cards, you don't mind them dying because you're going to get value off of them when they die. Again, think Young Wolf type effects, Carrier Thrall, Bloodghast, right? So all those things, you play your Culling Ritual, destroy your things and your opponent's things, generate lots of mana, and get a lot of value off of that. So a lot of times I see Professor Amateur, playing this, regrowthing it, and playing it again, and just generating a ton of mana, generating a ton of value with the sacrifice triggers, and then replaying or rebuying the cards that got sacrificed with Culling Ritual. So very interesting use of this card. And then we've got Diabolic Tutor here as a budget version of Demonic Tutor. Again, budget, Demonic Tutor would add like, 30, 40, 50 bucks just there. So if you've got it, great. But Diabolic Tutor will do you just fine. We've got some removal here with Fatal Push, Nature's Claim, some interaction with Veil of Summer, Village Rites for card draw, Abrupt Decay, Assassin's Trophy, Beast Within, Putrefy, as we all mentioned, and then a Deadly Rollick. Just a good card to have in pretty much any black deck, I think, that is casting their commander early-ish. Like a lot of these, again, most of the sorceries here are ramp and synergy with the deck or just value cards, and a lot of these instants are just plain old interaction, which I really like. The sorceries here being very value-oriented card, instant speeds being all interaction, besides maybe Village Rites, which is a value card. Everything else really being interaction. I like seeing that. I think that makes a lot of sense to me of, saving your source, not trying to have sorcery speed removal or interaction, reserving all of that for your instant speed and using sorceries here for kind of the more, I don't want to say flashier plays, but more, paying attention to your deck. Think about it. Sorceries is where you pay attention to your stuff. Instants are where you pay attention to your opponent's stuff. Kind of like that general rule of thumb. We've got 11 artifacts and enchantments here to close it out. We've got Soul Ring, classic. Witch's Oven, which is part of the Infinite combo that we're going to go over later. Arcane Signet, classic. KCI, or Clark Clan Ironworks, for those who don't know this card. This one is another one that is part of the Infinite combo, but can also just... well, I guess there's not really a lot of artifacts. You have Solemn Simulacrum, you have Burnished Heart, you have some artifact creatures. It would kind of be nice to have some more artifact creatures, maybe get a little bit more value out of this, but anyways. And then last in the combo, I think all three of the combo pieces are artifacts, so that might be not a great thing. But anyways, we've got Salvaging Station, which is 6 mana for an artifact that has tap, return target non-creature artifact from your graveyard. With converted mana cost 1 or less from your graveyard to play right to the battlefield. It says whenever a creature is put into the graveyard from play, you can untap Salvaging Station. So again, they're really the only 1 mana non-creature artifacts here are Soul Ring and Witch's Oven. Probably not going to have Soul Ring in the graveyard, hopefully. So again, it's really just the Infinite combo with Witch's Oven, which I will explain in just a moment after we go over these enchantments and the lands as well. So we've got Phyrexian Reclamation, classic. Again, this is where we're talking about rebuying that value. Again, paying 2 life, getting a creature back, playing it, sacking it. Like that this is a very cheap effect Vampiric Rites is kind of a mini Shessra in a box of just paying 2 life, sacrificing a creature to draw a card. Incidental life gain there is not to be forgotten. You are paying life with Shessra as well as some other cards, so that's really nice to see. Bastion of Remembrance essentially being another Zulaport Cutthroat, very nice. And then I really like this one a lot. I remember this card back in the day from the dual deck? Is it Golgari dual deck? Is Golgari Germination is 1 green-black for an enchantment that says whenever a non-token creature you control dies, you make a 1/1 Saproling. So this again kind of turning all of your creatures into Young Wolf, getting the initial body and then the token off of the Germination. And if you think about it, then with carrier thralls and things like that, it's getting you even more. You sack the carrier thrall, you get the Eldrazi Scion and the the Saproling token. So really, really spicy card there, and I like that a lot. We've got Journey to Eternity, which is a nice aura. You put it on a creature, you sack the creature, and it comes back into play transformed. Oh, gotta get the transform side. Where you at? Into a land that basically just either adds 1 mana, or you can pay 5, tap it to return a creature to the battlefield. Not the best value. Again, a lot of the creatures are fairly cheap. So, you're not getting the best mana advantage of, you're not like reanimating a huge card, but it's still nice to just have that mana sink late game to just be able to, pay 5 mana, 6 mana essentially, and reanimate and get back a card, and not have to worry about, paying 2 life with something like Phyrexian Reclamation. And then here we have a Death Reap Ritual, which is essentially Shessra on a stick. It's an enchantment, morbid, at the beginning of each end step, I should say. It's even better. Ooh. If a creature died this turn, you may draw a card. So this is even better, where this can trigger on your opponent's turns. So every turn you're just sacking something, getting some value, and continuing to draw lots and lots of cards. So this is might be a really good tutor if you have, a tutor target for something like Demonic Tutor, to just search this up, get drawn a ton of cards. I like that plan a lot. In the land slot here, nothing really to stand out here. I don't believe there's really anything, because we do have Grim Backwaters, 4 mana, sack a creature, draw a card. Not bad. Again, kind of like Journey to Eternity. Just nice to have that mana sink. Let's see what else we got. Nothing really all of that noteworthy. Just fairly limited. We got Urborg and Yavimaya here. Makes your mana really consistent, which I like. There was nothing like Phyrexian Tower or anything, crazy like that. I do still think Bojuka Bog. I'm gonna say it every time. Yeah, it's not in here. Very cheap. Definitely a card that you should put in your deck. But let's talk very quickly about the Infinite Combo. And we've got a special diagram from Professor Amateur himself. So let's take a look. All right, here we go. So we've got a diagram here. Again, thanks so much for providing this, because it would be very difficult for me to explain how this works without it, definitely. So in order to do this, as I said, we need Cauldron Familiar, Witch's Oven, KCI, and Salvaging Station all on the battlefield at the same time. The first step of the process is to sacrifice Witch's Oven. Use Witch's Oven to sacrifice Cauldron Familiar. That is going to put a trigger on the stack for Salvaging Station. Salvaging Station says whenever a creature is put into the graveyard, you untap it. So you're allowed to respond to that trigger. We're going to respond to that trigger by sacrificing the Witch's Oven to KCI in order to add 2 mana to our mana pool. And then we are going to, still on the stack, activate the Salvaging Station. So there's a trigger on the stack to untap Salvaging Station. What we're going to do is respond to that before it actually untaps and get Witch's Oven back onto the battlefield. So right now we have Cauldron Familiar in the graveyard, Witch's Oven in the graveyard, but we've got Salvaging Station bringing it back. So then we allow the triggers to resolve. We've got Salvaging Station untapping. Witch's Oven is back in play, then Salvaging Station untaps. And then we've got a food as well that comes onto the battlefield. And then we can use that food to bring back Cauldron Familiar by sacrificing it. And now we have essentially done, gotten back to our original game state of Cauldron Familiar on the battlefield with Witch's Oven, KCI, and Salvaging Station. And our opponent has just lost 1 life, and we gain 1 life. So this is able to be repeated infinitely, as you said, to essentially drain our opponents endlessly, causing for us to win the game. There can also be, again, if you have extra effects like Zulaport Cutthroat, Grim Horror specs, you can draw your deck, but don't recommend doing that unless you are actually going to kill everyone that turn, especially drawing your deck. Drawing your deck can be very dangerous. Let's go back and talk about the deck now that we know how this combo works. All right, so now that we know about this combo that's in the deck, how good is the deck overall? And also, what is the strategy of this deck and how do you play it? Well, first of all, our first goal is to play some creatures, play some ramp, and kind of get ourselves set up for success. And then we want to start playing Shessra and then triggering its ability to draw lots of cards. And with those cards, we're going to be playing our sacrifice outlets, our sacrifice payoffs. So again, those sacrifice outlets being things like Carrion Feeder, and also we've got we've got Village Rites and things like that. And then we also want to be playing the payoffs like Grim Horror specs. Fleshback Marauder can be countered as something like that. Poison Tip Archer, right? So these things that reward us for sacrificing a creature, Shessra counts for that. We've also got Death Reap Ritual. So these things that reward us when we sacrifice our creatures, and when either by reaching a certain threshold of creatures to just sacrifice all at once, kill our opponents with our Zulaport Cutthroat triggers, as I said, Priest of Forgotten Gods, and things like that. I don't think, does Priest do damage? Yeah, each player loses 2 life. Yeah, so things like that that deal our opponent damage while we sack a ton of things. And then either winning the game that way, or you can also again win the game, as we said, with our Salvaging Station, KCI, Witch's Oven, Cauldron Familiar combo. So how good is this deck, and why should you play it? So the first thing I'll say is that similarly with a lot of the decks that we look at on this channel, they are built in such a way, not necessarily to not be optimal, but they are built in such a way that they can be played in a variety of playgroups at different power levels. So once again, you could play this as a very casual table, playing your Ambush Vipers, playing your Young Wolves, and just kind of, getting some nice triggers with Shessra, drawing some cards, playing your Zulaport Cutthroats and whatnot. Or you could play it at that mid power level where you are playing, your Veil of Summers, your Nature's Claims, to interact with your opponent, and then, prevent their game plan, using Fleshback Marauder and things like that. And then you can, combo. And so it has those different capabilities, as we've seen. So, and again, if you're playing with a, just a more casual group that doesn't like combos, you don't have to combo to win the game. So I really like seeing, again, these decks that are built like that, so that you don't have to build an entirely new deck when you go to a new play group. So very nice to see that. Also really, really like the uniqueness of the deck. Again, Shessra being a brand new commander that not a lot of people use, but still is playing a lot of staples and cards that we know of, while also maybe adding a few special flares in there, as I said, like the Culling Ritual. Although I think Culling Ritual is fairly, I don't know, it should be standard, but, not out of the ordinary, let's say. And so, yeah, I think, if you are really looking for a unique commander deck that doesn't just, play, the same commander that everybody's playing, but at the same time is still familiar in terms of what it does, this is a great choice Again, the commanders interacts very well with the deck, and so it provides that good sacrifice theme, while still feeling like a unique deck. As for that, let's give it a rating before we close out the video here. I think I'm gonna give this deck. I'm trying to give it like a good balance. I think I'm gonna give it a 7.5. I'm trying to balance out the power level of the deck with the purpose of the deck. I think the deck is lacking in some power level, but that's kind of why it exists. I think with a few major inclusions, Phyrexian Tower, Demonic Tutor, I feel like Gilded Goose could kind of be a, I guess that's not exactly the Cauldron Familiar strategy here, but some things like that, maybe upgrading this Liliana to a different Planeswalker. There are some different inclusions that I might do, but in general, I think it's, again, well built, a ton of fun, very unique, and I'm very excited to see it. So 7.5 for the deck. Again, great job, Professor Amateur. Does a great job with all of these decks and has made great strides to make unique deck lists. He's making a ton of very unique commander deck lists. Might see more of those in the future. All right, that is going to do it for the video. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, remember, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And you can also find me live at twitch.tv/Roxora098. We do a ton of variety over there, as well as, just normal Magic content. So feel free to check that out. All right, guys, that's going to do it for me, and I will see you for the next video.